Good evening, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And today we are going to be looking at the transition into a Jamaican monarchy, right? Because all of this, what we call the Constitutional Reform Council, is all about creating another monarchy. And that is in tandem with what is happening in the world. We do not see in the world, in a world in which governments are actually vouching for freedoms, right? They're actually seeking more power. Presidents are gaining more executive power day after day as we witness our world, moving into that direction of tyranny. And this is no joke. This is something that all citizens of the world have to be concerned about, that our governments are not seeking to decrease their power, they're actually seeking to increase power. Now, we must also open up with what is happening in Haiti before I go into what is happening with this reform committee. Now, I must here say that I have not read the full report on the Constitutional Reform Committee that Marlene Malahou Fort actually released some days ago. But I have, done a cursory examination of it, and it is something very, very interesting. And I shall look at it shortly. But let us talk about Haiti briefly before we get into matters relating to Jamaica. Now, we know that Haiti is, one of a neighboring country in the Caribbean Sea, very, very close to Jamaica. And now we are hearing a lot of noise about troops being sent, Kenyan troops being sent to Haiti as we speak, as William Ruto, the president or the prime minister of Kenya, has decided that he is going to obey US orders, even though he's suggesting that he's not obeying US orders. The Kenyan people, according to him, are the ones who are making that decision to help Haiti to come to a nation or to turn to some semblance of order and to maintain peace and stability. Because these are the two buzzwords, right? The two words that we hear presidents and prime ministers around the world using: peace and stability, right? That is what their mandate is. Their mantra is always to maintain and to preserve peace and stability. But the more we hear them say that, it's the more we see that our world is in a situation where lawlessness, I should say, and disorder are really the buzzwords of the day. So I leave you, citizens, to decide whether or not you think that the troops that are being sent to Haiti from Kenya are there to maintain law and order, or do you think that they are going to create more lawlessness and social disorder and unrest, right? That is something that we've got to really contemplate. I do not think, based on the interview that was done by journalists at the press conference there in Washington, D.C., when President Biden was hosting William Ruto, I just don't think that the president's response to the Kenyan question about the fact that many Kenyans in that country are suffering, and why would the president of Kenya decide to send troops when he needs to take care of domestic matters, domestic issues. But let us listen briefly to what the interviewer was asking his president, that is William Ruto. All right, so let me share my screen with you and let us listen briefly to this interview that was done at the press conference, I believe at the White House. All right, so let's get it there.
Um, you said that Kenya is committed, and in your Carter's fiction, Atlanta, you said it's based on humanitarianism and think Haiti out. But can you explain the geopolitical goal, 12,000 kilometers away from Nairobi, when schools in the counties of Baringo, West Pokot, and Turkana have not yet opened because of the banditry problem, yet you are committing our national police force to Haiti? And where is the priority? It's been one of your major manifesto pillars, talking about security, and to the extent that even the defense cabinet talked about the deployment of, if need be, the Kenyan military or special personnel to make sure that schools are reopened, children go to school, in areas that are funded for in Kenya. Why are you committing to Haiti when we have a problem back home? Is it an irony that you are putting the fire in the faraway neighbor's home where we are on our own homes on fire?
Thank you very much. I made a commitment to the people of Kenya to sort out insecurity in the North. I have followed that with action. As we talk, there are 3,000 military officers in the North, 2,000 police officers in the North. We have renovated the first 15 schools and completed. We have reopened 20 schools already that were closed in the North Rift. And that exercise is ongoing. We have made tremendous progress in making sure that we create security at home. But that does not take away our responsibility. Even as we were deploying troops and policemen in our own country, in North Rift, to sort out the banditry problem, we still deployed 1,000 troops to DRC Congo, because that is our neighbor. We have 5,000 troops in Somalia, because equally that is our responsibility. And Haiti should not be an exception. That's why deploying 1,000 security men to Haiti speaks to the same belief and commitment to peace and security.
Okay, so we have listened to the president of Kenya, and he's suggesting that the Kenyans are the ones who are actually trying to send, all right, who have agreed that a mission should be sent to Haiti, right, and not the president himself. But when you listened to, when I read a lot of the comments coming out of Kenya, many of the citizens are saying that they are not in agreement. They are not in agreement with this dispatch of troops to Haiti. They are in total disagreement with the president's action. And also, I've heard from some Kenyans online, those who have been making comments, they're saying that the Constitutional Court in Kenya, Kenya's Constitutional Court, also does not recognize this dispatch, this deployment of troops. So you really wonder, and the Kenyan parliament also is in disagreement. So here you have the Kenyan people, you have the Kenyan Constitutional Court, and also the Kenyan Parliament for the most part. We're not saying everybody might be, in those circles of people, that everybody is not in agreement. Some might be, but it seems to me that there is a consensus in Kenya from these three main societal categories, right? The Constitutional Court, the Parliament, the Kenyan Parliament, and also the citizenry. Right? They are in agreement, they have a consensus that they should not be, that the Kenyan troops should not be occupying Haiti at this moment, right? And yet, the president of Kenya is suggesting otherwise. He's suggesting that, yes, that there was some sort of civic consensus, right? And that the people, the citizenry of Kenya were in agreement. And so we're hearing so many different narratives. We do not know whom to believe, right? But we can see, if we look around the world, that is the sort of behavioral tenets that we're seeing coming from governments around the world, right? They act and they tell you that they're doing all these great stuff for your country. At the same time, they are, their tenure is catastrophic, and they're not doing what they say that they're doing, right? We're not seeing all of the progress and the prosperity that they're telling us that they are creating or that they have created. And notice when the journalist asked him about the fact that Kenya is already on fire, he's suggesting that we've built schools and bridges and roads and and hospitals and all the things that we have done, according to William Ruto. And the journalist was very clear that Kenya is on fire. And why are you sending our soldiers or Kenyan soldiers to Haiti? The same thing can be applied to Jamaica, right? Jamaica is on fire. We see the large number of homicides that, have been created, that have been, that happened, right, in our country so far. And we are not so much concerned about that. We are more concerned about Mark Golding's dual citizenship, which is actually permissible by the Jamaican Constitution, right? But we are not concerned about the fact that our country, Jamaica, is actually burning, right? We are willing also to deploy troops to Haiti, to send troops to Haiti, thinking that we are going to create some peace and stability, as Washington is suggesting, when we know that that is not the case, when we know that the Haitians, for the most part, have rejected this presidential council. Now, what are we talking about, and what world are we trying to live in at the moment? I think that is something that we have to ask ourselves, right? Are our governments lying to us? Are we really living in democracy? Are we really free? And at this juncture of our history, the entire world, I'm talking not only about Jamaica and Haiti, but the entire world, do you think that we're heading towards republicanism? Or do you think that this is a different era where most countries are heading toward tyranny and dictatorship? I allow you to answer those questions for yourself, having done enough reflection, right? And you've got to reflect, because some of you think that what Marlene Malahou Ford in Jamaica is doing with this constitutional reform committee, that she is about to dispense freedom to Jamaican citizens. And she is about to expand on our freedoms. And I don't think that's the case. If you read the report that is coming out of that office of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, you will understand that that is the antithesis of what she's doing, right? The state is actually accumulating and expanding on its powers, right? That is what is happening in Jamaica. And every country that I'm looking at, that is what I'm seeing. Recently, the Dominican Republic had its elections held on past Sunday. Last Sunday, they had their elections. And soon after the president, that's Presidente Luis Abinader, won the elections, he was saying that he also, would like to revise the Constitution, right? So everybody is about doing a revision of their Constitution. For what purpose are they doing that? And you've got to ask yourself that question. And when you look at the pulse of the nations around the world, do you think that the citizens of the world are content with their governments, right? And with the performance of their governments? Do you really think that that is the case? Do you think that this sort of Republican status is going to help countries, including Jamaica, which is actually working so hard on, achieving, as it were, Republican status? Now, I'm not here suggesting that we should not become a republic. What I'm suggesting, what I have been arguing, is that if we're just going to become a republic in name and not in substance, and if at the root we're not trying to build, then then it's not going to be worth it, because we're building on sand. And I think that we're building on sand. And we know what happens when you build on sand. If we were seeing that these politicians are truthful, right, and that they were building on firm foundation of law and order, then I could say, yes, we seem to be heading in that direction. I was talking to a friend recently, and I said to him, quite frankly, that perhaps if I were in Barbados, as even though I think Barbadian Republican status is also a fake republic, but the fact of the matter is, for the most part, we could see that they have done something with their country. They've built their country. It might not reach first world status as yet, but it's regarded as developed, right? And the fact of the matter is that when we look at Jamaica, we have always been building on sand, right? Or politicians, because they want the people's votes, they have to lie to them, they use a lot of propaganda, and Jamaican citizens, they vouch for it. Now, do you remember about 2012, thereabout, there was a poll conducted in Jamaica in which most citizens, I think it was over 65% of the citizens, said that they would have preferred, if they were still living under the British monarchy, that they were not content after 50 years of independence with the Jamaican situation. And I think a poll was taken also in 2022. Fast forward, that's now 60 years into Jamaica's independence. That's political independence, because we don't have economic independence. But let us say that and we don't even have full political independence, because as you all know, that Jamaica is a constitutional monarchy, right? So the monarchy is still the head of state. So even when you're talking about Mark Golding having dual citizenship, even though Mark Golding, yes, is a bona fide citizen of Great Britain by his father's descent, right? He is a subject of the king, right? Who is the head of state. Whether you don't even say to me, oh, it's ceremonial, but he is still the head of state of Jamaica. So when you say that Mark Golding is sworn to a foreign country, technically he's not, because the British monarchy is the head of state, remains so until that is changed, right? Until that is changed. And if we do have, a law about what you call it, a constitution that is sincere, right? Which I don't think is going to be sincere, then we can change those rules. And then Mark Golding and other persons, everybody will have to abide by those rules. Not only Mark Golding and white people, right? Whether you're Black, Chinese, Indian, right? Whoever you are, you must abide by the constitutional laws set out in the Jamaican Constitution. Right? So it's something that we have to understand. Now, I was looking at the report, that's the Constitutional Report Committee, the report that they issued some days ago. And I was reading it last night around about 1 a.m. And I thought, this is interesting, right? And we've got to read these things for ourselves. People, you might not be a legal scholar, and you don't have to be one. Somebody said to me, oh, you're a university graduate, why are you talking about the Constitution? You do not have to be a legal scholar to interact with your Constitution. In fact, that is supposed to be a very fundamental responsibility of all citizens, to know what their Constitution says or does not say, right? Something that we have to understand, something that we need to reflect on, because many of us as citizens, including myself, oftentimes we do not know our Constitution, and that is a supreme law of the land. So how are you going to know? How are we going to know? Let me include myself, because I'm also an ignoramus, right? Right? I am also an ignoramus, if the truth be told. How are we going to know when the government is actually, overreaching, when there's an actual government overreach and overstepping its boundaries, crossing that line between freedom and tyranny? How are we going to know if we do not know our Constitution? Why do we leave it open to the legal scholars? The same thing with the Bible. Remember now that we have a responsibility in the secular world as we have in the spiritual world, right? The Bible enjoins us to what? To study, to know the truth for ourselves. We ought not to leave it up to your pastor or to your priest, whatever church you attend, to know the Bible. Right? You ought to know the pages of the Bible, interact with it for yourselves. You don't have to study Greek and Hebrew, and you don't have to do, all of these theoretical dynamics and, theological history to understand the Bible, right? The Bible is its own interpreter. The Constitution, you can read for yourselves. And sometimes you might have to look up some words, some technical jargons, but you ought to have that fundamental responsibility and take that fundamental responsibility seriously, right? Something that you've got to think about. Now, as I was reading the report, right, I looked at the people who are involved in this committee, and I am going to show you. By the way, they have, for those of you who want the report, let me share my screen with you. You can have it. And that's a good thing that the government is doing, right? That they're sharing the report. Give Marlene Malahoo for her credit. She has made the report online accessible, right? To all Jamaicans who desire to read it for themselves. So this is the website, and you have the mlaca.gov.jm constitutional reform. All right, so I'm sure you're seeing the website here. You can go and you can access. You can just go Google and look at the ministry. You can Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Jamaica, and you'll see that. So she's the chair, Marlene Malahoo Fort, right, and she's KC, which stands for King's Council, JP, Justice of the Peace, and she's also a member of Parliament. And we have the committee liaison officer, and this is Mr. Christopher Harper, and he's a senior constitutional reform officer. And there are other people, members of the committee, Ambassador Rocky Mead, right? And he's co-chair officer of the Prime Minister, right? So this is Rocky Mead, quite a controversial person. Isn't or wasn't he the Commissioner of Police? I don't know. All right, we have Dr. Derek McCoy, right? And he is CD. What's CD again? Carry something of distinction. JP KC, Attorney General of Jamaica. So, oh, this is the Attorney General, Dr. Derek McCoy. I'm not so much familiar with him. And then we have Senator, the Honorable Tom Tavares Finson, and he's OJ, that I know that's the Order of Jamaica, CD, and he's also KC, which stands for the King's Council, President of the Senate and Commissioner of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Then we have Senator Ransford Braham and CD, KC, Government Senator. And we have this lady here, Senator Donna Scott Motley, and Parliamentary Opposition and Senate. I'm wondering if she is married, right? This Donna Scott Motley, she's married to, you know, a family member of Mia Motley. I don't know. Is Motley a Jamaican name, a Jamaican last name? I am not very familiar with that name being a Jamaican name, but we could, you know, it's a diverse society, so we might have Motleys as well in Jamaica. Now we have also Mr. Anthony Hilton, and he is MP, Parliamentary Opposition, and House of Representatives. So here is Mr. Anthony Hilton. And then we have this now, the Professor Richard Albert, and he is international constitutional law expert. And remember now that he is the professor at University of Texas in Austin. Now, he's of Jamaican descent, I understand, but a Canadian citizen. I think he perhaps is also a United States citizen by naturalization. The fact of the matter is that he is, I understand, the only non-Jamaican, even though he's of Jamaican descent, but he is not a Jamaican citizen who sits on this committee. And the question is, why? Now, you're arguing over Mark Golding's status of dual citizenship. When people are making your laws, you have to be very careful. These are the persons that you should be doing a lot of investigation on, because they're going to make laws that will last forever, that perhaps will last permanently, right? So he's a guy, I'm not saying that you should go and knock him, right? But you should be doing a lot of research on this guy to see what his agenda really is. And why did Jamaica retain his services? I think that you should be looking at that and not be looking at Mark Golding's dual citizenship, because at the end of the day, Mark Golding, if he wins the election, right, he has a tenure. He's going to leave office, even though, yes, he's going to ratify laws and all of that and treaties, but he leaves office after so many years. Laws remain with us sometimes for a long, long time. Now we have Dr. the Honorable Lloyd, what's his name? Barnett, and he's OJ and Order of Jamaica National Constitutional Law expert. I am not so much aware of him, not familiar with this guy's name, but Dr. the Honorable Lloyd Barnett. Now we have Mr. Hugh Small. He's a very famous legal scholar, Jamaican legal scholar, Hugh Small, consultant counsel and nominee of the leader of the parliamentary opposition. And then we have Dr. David Henry, wider society, faith-based. So he's faith-based. I think, what does faith-based mean? Church and state? I don't know. Coming together? You know, not very good. Then we have Dr. Nadine Spence, and she represents civil society. I think I heard from her on TVJ, very eloquent miss, and she really is a great representative on this constitutional reform committee. Really like her, you know, her vouching for Jamaican rights, right? So she is also a social and political commentator really what she has to say is always substantive in terms of what she is articulating. Now, Mrs. What's her name? Lalita Davis Mattis, right? And he's the National Reparations Committee. So so you have to have people from the Reparations Committee. In fact, when I read the report, you also have the guy, the Devonish or a representative, I shouldn't say Devonish, let me not call his name, and he's going to say, oh, why are you calling my name? I'm not on the committee. But they do have a representative from the University of the West Indies language unit, Jamaican language unit. Right? So you're going to talk about language as a human right. So you know that they're going to be pushing now the Creole and what that is about, what that agenda entails, right? That is what they're going to do, right? Because that is what they do. So she's representing the National Reparations Committee. Now, that's interesting. Now we have Mr. Sujay Boswell. I think he's a past student of Monroe College. I did know him when he was I saw videos of him when he was at Monroe. Very intelligent young man. I'm not sure. He's a youth advisor, right? He's a youth advisor. I think he says when he was at Monroe, he wanted to be Prime Minister of Jamaica one day. And that is how I really marked his face. And then we have here Dr. Elaine McCarthy, and he's chairman of the Jamaica Umbrella Group of Churches. So here we have a faith-based representative, right? So I'm sure this is a church, merger of church and state representative. And we have Jamaica Umbrella Group of Churches, Dr. Elaine McCarthy. So the committee here, I would say, is a church-state sort of agreement, right? I'm not sure if that is a good precedence that is actually being set, right? You will decide that, you will determine that yourselves. Now, this morning, Peter Escute, right? Well, this before I move on, there is a new law coming in Jamaica that is saying that Chuck, that's his what's his name? Derek Chuck, that's his name again? Yeah, Chuck, yeah. Let me not massacre his name, Delroy Chuck, not Derek, but Delroy Chuck, right? Sorry, Mr. Chuck. Law coming to ban corporal punishment in homes. Now, what is that about? Right? The government is on a mission to outlaw corporal punishment in homes, as it now is with schools island-wide. Right? So the government is going to tell parents what they should do and not do to their children. Now, I'm here not to suggest and to support abuse, but parents should have that right to whether or not they want to use corporal punishment, right? I think that we should try as much as possible to probably limit its use and its abusive uses, but the corporal punishment does have its place, right? Sometimes it does have its place if it's applied in a loving manner, not in an abusive manner. Sometimes some children need that sort of punishment. The culture of beating children in schools has largely changed, and we see what is happening in the schools, that there is social disorder and that teachers are no longer able to control many of their students because they can't apply that system of punishment to their students. And we see what happens in the United States and the lawlessness a lot of times in the classroom because teachers no longer have that authority to wield over their children, over their students, I should say, not children, but students. The culture of beating children in schools has largely changed with legislation, strong enforcement, and the intervention of the education ministry across administration. That shift began in the last 30 years, and Justice Minister Delroy Chuck is hoping this will soon filter into all homes island-wide, right? It is wrong. In other words, we must not use straps and whips and belts, especially belt buckles. Yeah, I agree with that. Some of the things we should outlaw. I think what the government should do, and I would agree with it, that some of the punishment, like the use of some of these, belt buckles and, you have like the tire wheels and these are the terrible things, parents ought not to use that on their children. That is abuse, right? They're abusing their children physically, right? So I would agree with that, but you can't just say you're going to outlaw corporal punishment, right? Because you're suggesting now that the government should definitely supervise parents and what they, how, you know, the manner in which they actually dispense, I should say, punishment to their children, how they discipline their children, right? Every parent must learn to scold the child, even to deprive the child of some form of activity or put them in the corner to stand up is wrong. Even to put them in the corner to stand up is wrong? To deprive a child of some form of activity or put them in the corner to stand up is wrong. And I know it's difficult for parents to really challenge their children to be on the right path, but I dare say that corporal punishment rarely works, the minister said. But what I don't understand, let me read this again because I'm not understanding what Delaware Chuck is suggesting here. So we have every parent must learn to scold the child, even to deprive, but they must learn to scold the child, even to deprive the child of some form of activity or put them in the corner to stand up is wrong. I'm confused. Now, the government intends to outlaw any form of corporal punishment. We have done so in the schools and we want to do it in the homes because it is wrong. It doesn't help the child, and as far as we're concerned, it's much better to speak, perhaps, in a strong language to the child. But what if the child does not respond? Some children respond with that punishment, that form of punishment. Sometimes they just have to apply the whip, right? Not the whip in terms of the belt buckles, but I mean, you know, things that will not damage physically the child, right? But without, you know, pain, physical pain sometimes needs to be, applied, if it were, right? Because sometimes that's the way how some children will learn. They will never forget that sort of pain, rather than to be slapping the child, pinching the child, twisting the child's hair, and using all sorts of punishment to get behavior deemed appropriate by the parent. So it means, therefore, that just like the United States, if children do not, if they do not cooperate with their parents, right? If they do not obey their parents, and if their parents apply corporal punishment, they can call the police, right? They can report their parents to legal authorities. So evidently parents will eventually, right, see their authority being diminished, right? They will see their authority, their parental authority will be definitely be diminished as we see the years roll by, right? Something that you have to be aware of. It's interesting that a lot of Caribbean parents, including in the United States, because I'm talking here and perhaps in Canada also, sometimes they take their children to the Caribbean to apply that form of punishment to them, to let them know that, look here, I'm in charge, because they know that they can't do that in the United States. And oftentimes they believe that their children need some form of corporal punishment, right? So that they can learn some good lessons, right? Because, I do agree that we need to forbid the use, right, of some of these, tools that parents often used, right, to apply this corporal punishment, right? Because sometimes they would use some terrible things, right? They use the fork, right? They use the tire wheel, right? They use just about anything that they had access to, which sometimes applied very seriously and might even impose serious damage, right, to the child's physical constitution. Right? So those things should be outlawed. I do agree with that. I don't think, though, it is the government's right or authority to tell parents how to handle or how to discipline their children. You can let me know what you think about that, because it is quite concerning. We see where the government is taking on that moral impetus, right? As if they are the ones who should tell us what is right and what is wrong, right? The government can recommend, right? Can encourage, but should not legislate in terms of telling parents how they should discipline their children, because at the end of the day, it's their children. The government should protect, yes. And if the child is abused physically and so forth, that the government sometimes have to be involved and the parent has to get into court and all of that stuff, yes. So let the law run its course, right? Something that should be actually highlighted here. Now, this was an article written by Peter Espute, right? And he says more generalship, creating a monarchy, right? So we're creating a monarchy, which is what it is based on what I read. And before I read a little from Peter Espute's article that appeared in the Jamaica Journal today, let me just show you the constitutional report, right? The report coming from the Constitutional Reform Committee, right? It is the Constitutional Reform Committee, so please remind me of that. Sometimes I do say Constitutional Republican, but it's not a republic, but it's a Constitutional Reform Committee. So if I make a mistake, bear with me, right? Sometimes when you have a bad habit of saying some things, it sticks to the mind. So we have more generalship creating, I wanted, before I go to that, I was looking at the report coming from the committee, right? Let me go on to, I did give you the names of the persons who comprise the committee, right? So you can, the report is available online, so you can go mlca.gov.jm, right? It's all there, and you can read it for yourselves in your own, at your own time, in your own time, right? Okay, so let's go now to, this was what caught my attention. And I thought, where was it? Where is it? I think it's here. Yeah, it is 3.6.6. Yeah. In making this recommendation, the CRC, which is the Constitutional Reform Committee, is aware that the bill for the reformed constitution will still have to be presented to the Governor General for assent. Now, if you are going to be a republic, why does the Governor General have to assent to the recommendations or to the reforms? Yeah, we understand that he's still the head, but aren't you trying to sever from him? And what if because he represents the king, so what if he doesn't agree? What if he does not assent to the reforms that are there? And he says, no, take this out because I don't want it. The king is not happy with it because he represents the king, the British monarchy. I found that to be a little weird. It's bizarre that you're trying to move away from the king, right? And his representative, which is the Governor General, yet still the Governor General still has to assent to the reforms in this report, in the new constitution, in the proposed reformed constitution. The Governor General will have to assent, will have to give his consent, right, as it were, to the proposed reformed constitution, all right, or to the reformed constitution. He will have to give his assent, something that you need to bear in mind. And this is because the legislative role of the monarch to provide assent for a bill to become law remains unchanged until the reformed constitution is approved in the referendum. So if the British monarchy, let us say that Charles is really interested in what is happening with these reformed changes, right? With the reformed constitution. Let us say that he does not assent to some of the reforms of the changes in this reformed constitution. Then he can say he's not going to, the Governor General need not to assent, need not to give his consent. And what happens? We go back to square one. So I don't understand this, right? It's almost like in the United States where they were becoming free of Great Britain, that they had to send to England and sign off. And maybe they did, I don't know, right? Who knows what happened behind the scenes, right? But the fact of the matter is that they had to sign off before they really officially severed ties with the British, but at least they fought for theirs, right? So we're not fighting for ours. And that's the whole thing. How can you get Republican status without fighting for it? Fighting a literal battle and winning it. It means, therefore, that because Republican status cannot be given on a silver platter. I've been saying that freedom cannot come on a silver platter. It has to be fought for. And I don't think that what the clause here in this report makes any sense, right? But maybe it makes sense to you. Maybe I am just not that intelligent enough to understand what Marlene Malahou Fort is writing here, what she's articulating here. But let me read it again for you to digest. In making this recommendation, the CRC, which is the Constitutional Reform Committee, is aware that the bill for the reformed constitution will still have to be presented to the Governor General for assent. For assent. This is the word that is for assent, not to be signed off, but for his assent. Not for him to affix his signature only, but for assent. And he represents again the king, because he took an oath to uphold the laws and I guess the all of the things that pertain to the monarchy, right? This is because the legislative role of the monarch to provide assent for a bill to become law remains unchanged. Yeah, we understand that, but the fact of the matter is common sense dictates that if that is the case, then what if the Governor General, who is the representative of the British monarchy, does not consent? We are back to square zero, right? This is something that Jamaicans will have to think about, right? Now let's go on to the letter, not the letter, but the comment, not the comment, the commentary, the what you call it now, the commentary, the whatever you call it, yeah, that's what it is, right? That Peter Escute wrote this morning. He is a political commentator. So let's see if we can, pull up that article that he wrote. Just go through a little of some of his ideas, because he presents a lot of times some very, worthwhile substantive ideas. The recommendations of the Constitutional Reform Committee, CRC, are exactly what I expected from a bunch of political appointees representing the party in power, dedicated to make proposals to increase the power of the ruling party over the opposition and the people, right? The opposition nominees did not sign the final report. I don't see how they could. If the CRC recommendations are incorporated in Jamaica's new constitution, the power and the prerogatives of whichever party forms the opposition will be severely curtailed, as I will explain. What these recommendations do is create a Jamaican monarchy with the Prime Minister, PM, as the supreme monarch. And I don't think he's wrong. That's the impression I got when I was reading through that report. But then again, I want to read through it at least 3 times. I want to read it over and over so that I can digest what these people here are proposing. And I suggest also that Jamaicans do read it, get a copy. It's online, it's available free online. And he's saying the same thing. Readers, please download a copy. He is also suggesting that. I think you should do that. Please download a copy of the CRC report for yourself and read it. Very important that you read it. I'm going to read it 3 times, 4 times, because I have to look at the subtleties of that report. Verify for yourself that what I say below is indeed so. I think that it is on point what he's saying. Let us get straight to the point. The president is the prime minister's man or woman, whether the opposition party likes it or not. And even if they strongly object to the prime minister's nominee, and he went on to say the selection of the president is to be done through 2-stage process of nomination and confirmation, and he went on to say that. Let us look at this. In the absence of consensus between the prime minister and the leader of opposition, each is empowered to make a separate nomination to be confirmed by both houses of the parliament sitting jointly on a vote of an absolute majority of each house voting separately by secret ballot. right? And he says, what a piece of generalship. The PM goes to the leader of the opposition with his nominee. If the LO agrees, that is, there is consensus, then the name goes to both houses who must confirm by a 2/3 majority. But if both sides agree, the vote will be 100% for the PM's nominee. And the whole matter of fixed election date was something I thought was also generalship, as Peter is suggesting here too, right? Where they're suggesting that the prime minister and the opposition leader, they have to come together to call a date for election, rather than putting a fixed election date inside. It's still not very clear if there's going to be a fixed election date in that constitution. It's going to still depend on the prime minister and the opposition leader, but the power rests with the prime minister, which is what happens even today. So I don't know what they're suggesting here. And he looks at the 15 members of the recommendation of the prime minister. Look at this. I think you need to read this also. I just brought this to you because I just wanted you to understand that the CRC is bogus, right? It is fake. And if we, the Jamaican people, right, have to have the Governor General, who is the representative of the British monarchy, assent to the reformed constitution, to the principles outlined therein, I don't think that that is something that reflects a true republic. Because as I have been asking, as I asked previously, what if the Governor General does not assent, right? And he has all rights not to assent because he is representing a foreign power, right? Who is the king. So read this article for yourself. So I don't want to take you through it. I don't want to bore you with what Peter Esprit is saying, but I think that you should read the report that Malahoo, what's her name? That's it. Marlene Malahoo Fort actually released some days ago. Now, remember now that Marlene Malahoo Fort, I can't say that enough, is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. I should call her WEF, Marlene Malahoo Fort, the honorable, I forgot that word. She is the honorable, right? Marlene Malahoo Fort. And I'm not really, I don't think I put it past her that she might be up for becoming a prime minister in the future, right? I don't put it past her, right? But now she is in a very, very powerful position because she's actually crafting laws that are going to impact Jamaica for years, right? For years, and will change the fundamental dynamics of how we understand what liberty is about, all right? What freedom is or is not, right? And don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen, that we are heading into becoming a republic. I don't think that the United States now, through Kenya, heading to Kenya, sending Jamaican troops and Barbadian and Bahamian and all these troops, and from that country there are the Belizean troops to Haiti. And we're seeing that council. Somehow when I was reading the report from the Jamaican Constitutional Reform Committee, I just got some glimpses of the Haitian Transitional Presidential Council. I just don't know why. It seemed quite similar. There is some parallel there. And I try, I try as best not to make connections because sometimes you think I'm a little bit too nerdy, right, in making connections, and I can be, right? And I look at every detail. Try not to give me things and have me read it 4 or 5 times because I'm going to look at it in detail, right? I am going to look at that document in detail. It's best for me just to look at it, and just read through it without even thinking about it, and then I can be fooled. But if I'm reading a book or a document and I'm really putting my attention to it, I'm putting all the effort into that reading of that document and trying to understand it, I'm going to pick up the even the minor things that you think are minor. right? The minor details, right, involved therein, written therein in that particular document. So this is what I just have to say. Whilst Jamaica is clamoring for a republic, we see where troops, Kenyan troops, are being now deployed to Haiti. Something that is quite interesting. And Jamaicans are talking about Mark Golding. And, there is a surge of this mob-like mentality in Jamaica that I am concerned about. We've got to be careful of this mob-like mentality, right? We must apply the rules of the law indiscriminately, right? We must not discriminate against our citizens if they are white or they're blue or they're black or they're yellow or they're brown, right? The law must apply, right, equally to all citizens, right? And people are saying, I know that the Constitution permits Mark Golding. There are some people saying that to sit in Parliament, being a citizen of Great Britain, because he is a member or a citizen of a bona fide Commonwealth country, but it is not commonsensical for him to have dual citizenship and sit into the Jamaican Parliament. Now, if the rule says he can, you can't change that, right? Whether he was black or, you call him white, right? So you are thinking that, and because of his color, people are thinking that he might be, a betrayer of common trust because of his color. What if he were Mr. Patterson's hue or my hue? Would you think that he would have been a traitor? And why are so many Jamaicans seeking to have an American passport or a British passport or a Canadian passport and would do anything to have one? Why do you want Mark Golding to give up his when there are so many Jamaicans, make no bones about it, who would do anything, right? Who would just do anything. I see 19-year-olds getting married to 38-year-old and 50-year-old women, right? 19-year-old men, young men getting married to older women, right? To get a passport, a British passport or an American passport. And you see this man who, by descent, by his father's heritage, right? Because Mark Golding's father was British. That can't change who his father was, right? You want a passport, and you Jamaicans also said in 2020, in 2012, and I think in 2022, that you wished we were still under the monarchy. Because as much as we are seeing it, we're seeing that Jamaica is not progressing. And you think that there was more law and order, that Jamaica was a country that was more disciplined during the period of colonialism. And that is sad because, I heard Mutaba Ruka this morning speaking on his program, and he wasn't saying that we were better under the British monarchy, but he was suggesting that, how dirty Jamaica is. Garbage strewn all over the roads. And he sees people in downtown Kingston eating and having the garbage right beside them. When did we really go that low, right? How did we get here in terms of, we used to have our public inspectors or public health inspectors. Where are they? Because we used to have that. We grew up with that. And we didn't see garbage strewn over the street and people are sitting right there interacting with the garbage while eating. Right? That never used to happen. Why are we seeing this today? Right? How much have we been degraded? Right? And we continue to decay. And no one is talking about that much. We're more concerned about Mark Golding's dual citizenship, even though that is permitted. Now, you can change it if you want to, but it's permitted until you change the Constitution. Because look at what Marlene Malagu Fort is saying. She's saying that the Governor General still has to give his consent because that is how the Constitution is set up right now. So until the Constitution is fully reformed, which I can't understand how it's going to be fully reformed when the Governor General, who is the representative of the King, is going to give his consent or his assent to what is proposed or what are proposed in the reformed constitution. Something that you've got to think about, right? Something that you've got to think about. Do you think that this reformed constitution is just another monarchy being localized, having a Jamaican monarchy in which the prime minister reigns supreme? That is the question. Thank you so much for joining. Hope that you'll join me in another video when we shall look at another important matter. Right? See you then. Have a great night. Until then, ciao.